Hello and welcome to Mandibil. This is I don't know what my series on, I think it's part 15, but I forget the actual number. But check the title below, right? Um, and we have just delved into lecture 3, some 5 minutes or so into it, starting on something called anomalousness, right? And strangely, or curiously enough, he started out basically saying that people have a wrong idea, right? He's creating a strawman argument, actually, trying to portray critics as somebody who thinks that people like him are crazy physicalists, right? So it's also manipulative, this kind of strawman shit, right? Nobody with a decent level of intellectual integrity would start out by framing critics as having a certain opinion about stuff. It's a straw man attempt, right? And so also he suffers from all these fancy word fallacy, right? Which is, anomalousness. I'm too stupid to understand this. It's sort of patting the stupid people on the head and say, you're too stupid to understand this, so you just have to accept what I've been thinking, sort of, right? That's the impulse I get from anomalousness. I mean, how many people in the world use the term anomalousness apart from your little clan of illusionists, right? Yes, you could possibly look it up on Merriam-Webster or something like that and see, okay, there is actually a word called anomalousness. I don't know, and I don't care, right? It's sort of, okay, let me start out by throwing a very difficult word in your face, right? It says everything to me what this dude is up to, right? He's putting smoke and mirrors up, so you are sort of, it's like if you have a present, you get a present, and it's sort of, you open it up, there's 5 boxes, inside there is a map with some weird signs of it. You have to, decipher, and then you have to walk around the neighborhood, and then you're told you will have a new message in 2 days, and it's this kind of thing. It's sort of it's an adventure chase to find out what the hell is he talking about, right? And he keeps putting up some smoke and mirrors, right? Why can't he just, at least if he's going to spend so much time delving into it, he should make a short introduction that says, okay, the bare bone structure of this is I'm trying to argue for this, and then spend 5 minutes explaining it. And then he'll say, okay, this is the short version, right? Now I'm giving you the long version. And then he could come up with, 6 hours of explanation as he does here. I'm still dumbfounded what it is actually he's trying to do, right? I don't feel illuminated in any way. On the contrary, I feel like I'm being, sent on a goose chase, as they say, right? It's very annoying, this. Okay, let's get further down the road, right?
Some considerations that tend to support the position. Let's begin with a simple one. Anomalousness. If you come across some phenomenon that seems strange, mysterious, scientifically inexplicable, then it's reasonable to suspect that
Scientifically inexplicable. You mean so that science can explain things? What do you mean? I have to hear this again.
Let's begin with a simple one. Anomalousness. If you come across some phenomenon that seems...
Yeah, a simple one. Anomalousness. It's very simple.
Strange. Mysterious.
Strange and mysterious and...
Scientifically inexplicable.
Scientifically inexplicable. So things are strange and mysterious if science can't explain it. But what what does science actually do? And I even don't like the term, what does science? Science is not a thing that does anything, right? Science is an idea, a principle that you can adhere to in order to get to certain results, right? It's a sort of a mantra that your results or your whatever you come up with, let's say explanations, they are based purely on empiricism, I would say, right? You have to identify it by observing it, right? That's why I say to Keith Frankish, if he doesn't like qualia, show me a deaf and dumb scientist, please, right? Show me where they are, right? Deaf and dumb scientists. Where are they? Show me their work, right? Science doesn't explain anything, in my opinion. It's a misnomer to say that science explains anything. What science does is appeal to a scenario with certain content, and if things behave, if there's these certain objects, are, what's the word I'm looking for? Are there, are present. These things will unfold this way within a certain time frame, right? Things will unfold in this way, right? Science doesn't say anything about things standing still, right? It's always about what happens. It's never about what is, right? So science can those who are doing science attempts to predict how things will unfold, which means the future, by classifying a certain scenario with a certain content. And if that's the case, if you're scientific about it, you will attempt to say this will be the case in the future, right? And the first time you do that, that's when you're doing the science. And then the science works from the principle that things are going to unfold in the same way in the future. There's a causality thing, right? Which Hume has challenged, right? With good reason. He didn't say it can't occur, but you can't be scientific about causality, because causality is a foundation for science, right? So, and this is why I am very sort of, I have worked in the scientific area basically all my life, since my high school days, right? I know what it takes to do science. I know about the standard units and how to measure this and that and chemistry and so physics and so on. But what it does is only saying, if you have some of this and you have some of this and it moves this way, it will continue to unfold in this way. That's what science says. Science can't explain to you what an elephant is, right? You can't do science and say, oh, that's what an elephant is. No. You can maybe tell me what an elephant does if you throw it from a cliff and it's what's it called? Its free will is taken out of the roll, right? Then it will fall this way and it will take so many seconds and so on, right? That's what is scientific is it's not an explanation, it's a prediction how things will unfold, right? It's not about explaining things. It's not about, it can't explain anything, right? It's a misnomer. It's a misunderstanding of what science does, right? It takes one object. When you quantify things scientifically, you take one object and then you compare it to other objects, right? Like you take a stick that is this long, and then you say that other object is so many times this stick long, right? A standard stick. I have this object is 5.5 stick long. That's not explaining anything. That's just comparing stuff, right? And when you're measuring time, which is also a misnomer, you can't measure time. Time is not something you can measure, right? Even though you say that, well, you have a clock that measures time. No, a clock doesn't measure anything. It just have a regularity to you can count and say so many times this regularity have occurred since this and that, right? So it's just a constant flow of events, of the same events, between two other events, right? So it doesn't explain anything. Science don't fucking explain anything, right? Nothing.
Then it's reasonable to suspect that it might be an illusion. If someone appears to levitate from the ground before your eyes, then it's reasonable to suspect that there's a trick involved. Resistance to scientific explanation is prima facie evidence for illusion. It doesn't show that the thing isn't real, but it's reason to suspect that it might be an illusion. And so,
sorry,
from this perspective, the
I lost a
strangeness
bit of momentum there.
properties,
I have to rewind a bit.
resistance to scientific explanation is prima facie evidence for illusion. It doesn't show that the thing is...
I have to... If a phenomenon is resistant, does a phenomenon resist something? It's just is the terms used, right? This phenomenon is resisting my explanation. What kind of bullshit is that? The default hypothesis, what hypothesis, should be that it is illusory. What? So if you can't explain it, it's an illusion. Why? You can't just say that, man, right? So all those things that you couldn't explain 500 years ago were illusions. And now sort of science has come along and explained stuff, right? So now they're no longer an illusion. So if you go back to the Stone Ages, basically everything was an illusion back then, apparently, or what? And then anomalousness is itself prima facie evidence. Prima facie, what the hell is that? Would you mind explaining stuff? I need to get to prima facie. Prima facies. Prime feces. I'm being a little... It's annoying, right? Hang on. Okay. Prima facie. A Latin expression meaning at first sight. For the first time you... So it's only sight, it's not about hearing or tasting or anything like. Or based on first impression. Prima facie is sort of first impression. The literal translation would be at first face or at first appearance, from the feminine form of primus and facies. In modern colloquial conversation English, a common translation would be on the face of it. Upon initial examination, to signify that upon initial examination, sufficient corroborating evidence appears to exist to support a case. Okay, so it's sort of a first impression thing. Okay, let's have it.
Isn't real, but it's reason to suspect that it might be an illusion. And so, from this perspective...
It might be an illusion. What is an illusion? You need to tell me what you mean by an illusion. If I'm experiencing X, right? I have some qualia in order to experience. I can't, without qualia, without sight and sound and so on, I can't experience anything. That's the foundation. All these objects that I'm otherwise referring to, they are based on these qualia. God damn it, right? So how do I... What is it to classify something as an illusion? If it's resistant to physical explanation, then what is a physical explanation? What is that? If I say I experience elephant, but I'm experiencing, I can't explain elephant, right? Well, how would I explain elephant? I would say it has this color and this shape. Yeah, but they were there in order for me to identify the fucking elephant, right? And the elephant is something I'm experiencing. It's not the out there, right? So it's like he is explaining or de-explaining or refuting based on some words, basically. He's just using words he's throwing words up and then explaining a few of them and leaving the rest alone, and then say, because I threw up this word over here, I can't use this word over here, or something like that, right? And it's sort of like just all words that floats around in this description of his that is disconnected from a foundation I can relate to, right? So based on that alone, I can never get to support this. Even if he might be right, I will say this is so badly argued that I will reject it outright, because it is a dysfunctional explanation, right? It's not a coherent, structured argument. Far from it, right?
The strangeness of phenomenal properties, the existence of the hard problem itself, is a reason to at least consider the possibility that there's some kind of illusion or misrepresentation or...
Okay, so the way he does it is to say, if science, as if it's some monster or some being, right? If science kind of come along and tell me this is how it is explained, well, science doesn't explain your qualia, right? You need to understand this, man, right? You are actually using your qualia in order to do science. You need your qualia in order to identify these objects that moves around in this physics of yours that you can use. You then use to create these scientific quote explanations, which are not explanation. They're just descriptions of what might happen based on what is going on now and happened in the past, right? So you can't turn it around and say, okay, now I've done science. Now I'm going to point science towards my qualia and say I don't need the qualia because I got my science. And if this big science thing here can't point the other way and explain these qualia, I don't need the qualia. What the? Oh my God. He's tangled up in this huge ball of all sorts of, abstractions and words and cherry-picked situations and then, therefore, illusion, right? Oh, man. He's never going to find his way out of this, right? Oh, my fucking God.
Misconception or misinterpretation going off. That things aren't quite as they seem. And I have here a picture and a quotation from James Randi. James Randi, who sadly died recently, the famous magician and illusionist in the theatrical sense, and also a great debunker of claims for paranormal powers, debunker of people who claim to have paranormal powers. And Randi said this to Uri Geller. Uri Geller, the man who claims to have the power to bend, claims to be able to bend spoons simply by the power of his mind, simply by concentrating on the spoon in his hand, he can make it bend. Now, Randy knew various ways of making it appear that you are bending spoons in that way without applying any force to them. And he said this to Geller: if he's doing it by divine means, by using some kind of supernatural powers, then I can only tell him this: Mr. Geller, you're doing it the hard way. There are much easier ways to create the impression that you're bending spoons without applying any force to them. And I like to say the same thing about phenomenal consciousness. We have this sense that we have a private inner world that is magical and resistant to physical explanation. We have that sense. And somehow nature has created that.
Resist. But you can't explain qualia, right? You can't. Why are you so hung up on this explaining things, right? Because you think you need to explain it. You have to reject it and call it an illusion, right? So you are scientism. You're a science physicalist, a hardline materialist, right? If science can't explain it, it must be an illusion, right? Yeah, it may be an illusion. So what? What does it entail that it's an illusion? Because you would need the mind to understand that something is an illusion, right? At least you would need some kind of mental exercise of some kind, which is apparently an illusion. So you're using an illusion to clarify it as an illusion. Don't you see a problem there? I don't get it, man, right? So it's like everything that can't show up on an oscilloscope in a neuroscience laboratory is an illusion, right? Oh, man, why have I dived into this, man, right? Oh, man.
Sense in us. But if nature did it by actually creating such an internal world, then nature was doing it the hard way. Maybe there are easier ways. I believe there are easier ways of creating that sense, making us believe that we have such a magical inner world.
So, if I was standing beside Keith and I slapped him on the face, right? He wouldn't say that I am an illusion, I think, right? Because I'm a person, I think he would say, right? A person is not a qualia. That's a concept, that's an object, that's a cognitive thing, right? But his sense of pain in his face, that's an illusion, right? So he would have to just pretend that nothing happens. And I keep slapping his face, right? I think that he would say, please go away with that, right? Please stop hitting my face. Or he would try to interject and start to slap me on the face or something to get me away from doing whatever he don't like, right? He wouldn't say that his face pain is an illusion, I think, right? And if he says it's an illusion, he's still using it. He would still be using it, right? As a measure stick for how to do things, right? So if there wasn't any pain, right, would he care about it? If I was slapping him, but he didn't feel any pain, he wouldn't even call it slapping because there was nothing to justify it calling a slapping, right? Otherwise, he would see some movements visually, right? Let's say he could have vision, but he couldn't have pain. So wouldn't he, in the end, wouldn't he say, it's important for me to have this pain in order to not end up in this or that situation? Isn't that what pain is about? So it's useful, even if you call it an illusion, right? So what's the point of calling it an illusion? An illusion is something that you shouldn't take seriously. But I bet you he would take his face cheek, pain seriously if I kept slapping him on the face. It's ridiculous, man, right? Why are people like him funded? Are they all idiots, right? Can't they see any decent... Have anybody of his employers seen this bullshit he's creating here, right? Are they all in on it? Do they need him to sit there just so they can keep getting their wages or pretend that they're doing this high-flying philosophy, right? Anomalousness. Give me a fucking break, right? Put this man out on the street and let him find his own way. Let him start working a job where he actually creates some value, right? And let him just use his illusion there. Instead of sitting here telling me this bullshit, man, right?
And this kind of consideration, the consideration from anomalousness, I think has special force if the phenomenon we're talking about is viewpoint dependent. I suppose you see someone apparently levitate from the ground, but they insist that to witness the performance, you must stand in a particular location. You mustn't move.
The case is reinforced if the phenomenon is viewpoint dependent. Viewpoint, but viewing, is that not a qualia? You have to open your eyes to view or see something?
Move. Well, that's a reason to suspect illusion. If you were to move, you might see how they were doing the trick. And phenomenal consciousness is viewpoint dependent in a way. It's only a...
Okay, so if you see something as an illusion, it might just because you're seeing it from a certain angle. But aren't you refuting your own argument now, right? So if you see something as an illusion, it's just because you have the wrong... It might be because you're sitting in the wrong point, or sitting in the wrong angle, or whatever, or having a dependent viewpoint. So now you are shaking the foundation of your own argument. In any case, I would say, well, it's dependent on your viewpoint. Are you God or something, right? Are you some kind of viewpoint God? My view, I can see everything. I can see that it's an illusion.
Apparent from the first person perspective, from the perspective of introspection. Neuroscientists investigating your brain don't observe it. This is a point that's standardly made in discussions of phenomenal consciousness. It's subjective. But that itself can be seen as a reason to suspect that it might be illusory, because it's only visible from one perspective. Here, the psychologist Nicholas Humphrey has an example that I particularly like. The Penrose triangle, that is this figure here, this impossible object that is impossible to construct in three-dimensional space. So that's an analogy, if you like, for phenomenal consciousness.
No, this is just what you call forced perspective, right? When certain lines, certain points are lined up in a certain way, it looks like they are connected, but they really aren't, right? This is just creating a drawing that your mind tries to interpret as the three-dimensional object and then connecting it, right? But actually you are not. You see the object and then your eyes follow the angles around this way, and then you see, okay, this is connected, this is connected. When you see it, if you zoom out a bit and look in the center, you will just see a triangle. And when you look at the corners then, you see that, okay, this doesn't follow logically, right? But that's because the forced perspective have put them in a certain place so that it looks like they are. You can actually create this thing, right? And if you see it in the right angle, your mind will create this triangle. And if you see the movie like Lord of the Rings, where Frodo and Gandalf in the start in that wagon there, he arrives in Gandalf, right? They have created a forced perspective where Gandalf actually is sitting much closer to the camera than Frodo, and then they turn around as if they're talking directly to each other, but they're actually placed a few meters apart to make Frodo look like he's very small, right? It's just forced perspective. So I don't put any faith into any reasoning skill into just coming up with some weird objects that makes you feel like, oh, I'm on soft ground here. I guess he's onto something, right? Don't buy it.
Consciousness, something that seems impossible within our physicalist framework. And Humphrey compares that with another object, this one, which he calls the Gregundrum, after Richard Gregory, who created the Penrose triangle, is named after Roger Penrose, who I think first described it. The Gregundrum is named after the psychologist Richard Gregory, who designed it. That is a perfectly possible construction. You can make one of these out of bits of wood, and it looks something like that. Now, from most angles, this just looks like a strange construction of 3 pieces of wood, but if you look at it from exactly the right angle, it looks just like a Penrose triangle. From precisely the right angle, it looks like something impossible. So here you can create...
It looks like it, yeah. It looks like it, right? But that doesn't mean that it is. So you're actually refuting your own argument. Because if you're saying this is an illusion, it might just be because you're sitting in the wrong angle, right? Even if you're moving around, whatever thing, right? And it's also a bad argument, this, because he is using my qualia, my experience of X, in order to use that as an argument against X, or against the experience, right? I use my qualia, the blackness and the grayness and his voice and whatever, right? If I didn't have those qualia, I would be none the wiser, right? So it's like, yeah, I can see that if he could make the argument without using qualia, he would maybe be able to argue against qualia. But is that possible, right? He will need qualia in any case, in my opinion, right? And that validates qualia, because he is referring to his experience of something to explain that experience. So the something he experiences can't be a disproof of the experience, because he needed the experience to have that something. It just feels very much like a circular thing, right?
The illusion of an impossible triangle, if you look at a Gregundrum from exact...
And actually this, whatever Gregundrum, that's the forced perspective. That if you look at this particular angle, it would look like the left bit of that Gregundrum and the right upper bit of that Gregundrum, they will align, and when you look at it, it will look like they're connected. But that's just the mind trying to make sense of it, right? That the structure is not a qualia, right? You have to be careful when he jumps away from qualia. A triangle is not qualia. Space is not a qualia. An object is not qualia. These are abstractions from qualia, right? So you can use these abstractions to refute the qualia, because he needed the qualia in order to have those abstractions, right? Oh man, he's so tangled up in his own ideas, it's ridiculous.
Back to the right angle. Now, and Humphrey suggests that phenomenal consciousness might be a bit like that. Maybe certain brain states create the illusion of phenomenality when they're viewed from the perspective of introspection. They're viewed introspectively. Then
perhaps from a certain, what does it mean by certain, is a particular introspective viewpoint. Well, so an introspective viewpoint, a viewpoint is that sort of, I have an opinion, or a viewpoint is that seeing, what was a introspection is looking inward. So, but I have to look outward in order to experience this triangle or something, right? Creates the illusion of phenomenality. So now I have to go back. What the hell did he mean by phenomenality? You see this kind of, it's so awfully badly argued. All these terms he's throwing around, right? He's hiding behind a wall of terms, right? He is sort of shooting at you with fancy words to avoid you checking deeper, right? Going into the details. It's sort of, he shoots word at you, right? It's a sort of defense mechanism to shoot fancy ivory tower words at you, right? That's how I feel about it, right? It's unnecessary. Come down in size here, right? Come down to reality and use everyday language to explain your sort of everyday idea that this might be an illusion, right?
No more impossible than the Grigundrum, but seen from the perspective of introspection, they create the illusion of something impossible. Now, none of...
No, but if you can, I mean, I pointed out the point that he is confusing qualia and abstractions. That's obvious now, right? He's using abstractions now as an argument against qualia. That's fucking stupid, right? So, if you have only seen from that particular viewpoint where things look like this, that's because the mind finds it purposeful to identify it as such, right? That's how the mind is developed to do that. And you're fine with that. If that looks like a weird triangle over there, okay, fine, weird triangle. Fine, but I'm trying to take care of this tiger over here, right? What do I do about the tiger, right? Yeah, fine, weird triangle. Yeah, but the elephant there, right? Or the lovely young lady that looks like she wants to mate. What am I going to do about her, right? Should I eat her? Should I fight her? Or should I fuck her, right? Or you fuck the weird, no, what the fuck, the weird triangle? Yeah, triangle. I'm getting wound up in all sorts of ideas now. The weird triangle over there, never mind, right? I want the triangle here, the girl, right? It's just, you can't use the limitations of the mind trying to focus on what is important as an argument against the central tool that the mind uses for all the important stuff, right? You're trying to destroy any sense of... You're trying to destroy any sense, I would say. And you do not have your metaphysics straightened up, right? Because you keep using abstractions to explain stuff with, right? And where do these abstractions come from, right? You did have an experience of these conundrum triangles, right? You needed your qualia in order to, that's one of those conundrums, right? You couldn't, experience a conundrum in the Cape of the Good Hope, right? Unless you were sitting there. If you're sitting in Cyprus or whatever, wherever it is, Malta or Crete, you can't experience a conundrum in South Africa, right? So it needs to be in the vicinity of you, because then you use your senses, right? So that validates your senses in a sense, in order for you to make these arguments. I can't get my fucking head around how stupid it is, man, right? How can he not see this? See this, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. And this guy's paid to tell me about it, man. I mean, it's ridiculous, man.
But that is conclusive, of course, but it is suggestive. It suggests that an illusionist perspective on consciousness might be worth exploring. Okay, so here is another point, another consideration: coherence. There's reason to suspect that realism about phenomenal properties isn't coherent. And Therefore, the delusionism wins by default. This is really just a recasting of the points from the previous lecture, so I will be very brief here. Again, we have Daniel Dennett here, and we remember from the last lecture that Dennett has a variety of...
That's not Daniel Dennett, is it? Isn't it just a slab of colors on my screen? Right? Why do you need to show me some colors? Right? You're giving me fucking qualia and then telling me it's Daniel Dennett. It isn't. It's a photograph at most, right? A picture, a slab of colors, right? Oh my God. His intellectual bubble is disconnected from what he's doing in reality, so to say, right? He's contradicting himself in the way he does things compared to the argument he's trying to put forth, right? So when he's arguing, it's like, then I'm sitting in my intellectual bubble and making these, what I think is coherent arguments. And then he goes back into these everyday reality and he uses qualia all over the place in order to get around, right? Then it's apparently not an illusion, even though he's convinced himself it's an illusion. I mean, what kind of fucking life is he living, man?
Arguments and intuition pumps designed to cast doubt on the idea that we can know our own qualia. As qualia are standardly conceived of, there's no way for either first-person introspection or third-person science to answer...
Okay, there is no way for either first-person introspection or third-person science or to answer questions. That sounds like a bad sentence. There's something wrong with that sentence. It's not grammatically correct. So first person or third person or science answer questions about the nature of our qualia. But you have the nature of the qualia. You can't explain it. Just because you can't explain it doesn't mean that it's an illusion. There's some foundation of your experience that is inexplicable, right? Because that's what you use in order to explain everything else going on, right? With science that tries to predict what is going to happen in that physics in the future if the scenario is combined this way. Just because I can't explain what yellow is, I'm treasuring being able to have the color yellow, right? And if you call it an illusion, fuck that. I don't care what you call it. I still use it, right? I still like the color yellow. Not in the sense that it's my favorite color, anything like that. But I mean, when I look at my movie collection, I know that these covers that are all yellow on the spine, they are a certain set of movies of a certain series, right? I have 15 movies with that yellow spine, and I know I have a memory of what movies are there. So when I go to find my movies, I know to look for the yellow spine, right? I don't care if it's an illusion. I still use it. I'm using my illusion to paraphrase Guns N' Roses, right? It's useful, right? It's useful. If I want to find my bananas, I look for the yellow, right? When you look for your jar of pickles, you look for something greenish, brownish, whatever in a glassy stuff, right? How about blindfolding yourself and roam around your refrigerator, right? Would that be an advantage or a disadvantage for you, right? I would say that it would be a disadvantage for you, right? That's why you have your qualia, to get around. Oh my God, man.
Certain questions about the nature of our qualia, even very basic questions such as, have my qualia completely inverted? Now, if that's right, then if there's no way to answer these questions, then that suggests that the concept of qualia itself is ill-defined and impossible to apply. and therefore that phenomenal consciousness, which consists in the existence of qualia, is not a well-defined target for explanation. And if that's right, then trying to solve the hard problem is just not a coherent project. And so that means that the only coherent project that's left to us is that of explaining our phenomenal judgments and our reports and so on, and other reactions.
I don't like his way of doing this. I really have it's like it feels even slightly passive aggressive in this talking down to me like I'm a small child or something, right? I'm not trying to call children stupid or anything like that, but it's this. Oh man, he's annoying. Okay, let's have it. The concept of qualia. Well, is qualia a concept? Can't you just say qualia? Why do you need to say the concept of qualia? What is that? When I talk about an elephant, that's what I call a concept. But I needed my qualia in order to get to that concept elephant. So now we have a concept of qualia. Aren't he confusing the terms? Aren't he mixing the categories now? Ill-defined and impossible to apply? What? This is disconnected statements that ill-defined and impossible to apply. What? Apply to what? Phenomenal consciousness. What is consciousness? Is that different from qualia? Phenomenal. Consciousness, is that phenomenal? Consciousness is an awareness of you being able to cognize and have qualia. That's consciousness, in my opinion, right? You are conscious of your cognitive abilities and your qualia. That's consciousness. That's not a phenomenon. Phenomenal. The consciousness is phenomenal. No, you're conscious of the phenomenon, which is things moving about that you're trying to predict scientifically. I don't like phenomenal consciousness. That's a weird combination of words. I think he's mixing categories there again, right? It's not a well-defined target for explanation. A target for explanation. Oh man, he is so fucking annoying, man. This word salad thing, I don't buy it, right? Solving the hard problem is not a coherent project. But isn't it materialist or physicalist who have pointed out there is a problem, man? It's not a well-defined target for explanation. You don't have to explain it. No, just look away. Just pretend that you don't have, or just, enjoy the show. Just enjoy the theater while you are awake, right? Just enjoy the theater. It's not important. It's an illusion, but it's just there. Who gives a fuck, right? You can't explain it, so whatever. The only coherent project is that of explaining our phenomenal. No, that's no our. That it's your. Explain your own, right? You can't explain mine. That's my task, right? Your phenomenal judgment reports and all of it. A report is a fucking qualia, man, right? You can't report anything without using qualia. This is fucking annoying, man. I'm getting triggered now, man. This fucking idiot, man, right? Holy fuck, he's stupid, man. Somebody take the title away from him and put him on the street so he can go out and do some fucking valuable work for somebody, rather than trying to confuse people with this bullshit. Oh, man. Oh my fucking God. Holy shit, man, he's bad.
We're disposed to say these things, but the things we say don't really amount to a coherent description of something that could be real. So all that's left to explain is why we're disposed to say those things and think those things.
Okay. Theoretical economy. So it's this bitch slapping you with fancy words, right? Theoretical economy. Now we're going into economics apparently. And theoretical economy is economizing with your qualia. What I don't know. Well, we will have that next time because I'm stopping this part here. We're going close to 50 minutes in my part here. So we got some, 8 minutes further into a 2.5 hour lecture, as the case for Illusionism app. Holy fuck, this is bad, man. I can't believe how bad this is. Now, I knew if it was some kind of new channel with some young guy who sort of, hey, I figured it all out, man, and trying to argue for, I would maybe be more gentle, you can say, right? And I would maybe contact them and say, well, guess what? I'm trying to deconstruct this. I think I found a lot of errors in it. Let me present it in my own deconstruction on my channel, and you get back to me and we could have a discussion if you like, something like that. But this guy, man, right? He thinks he is fucking Jesus of illusionism or something like that. And he have found the big solution to the hard problem, and you should just ignore your qualia and then everything is solved. And, he's a fucking asshole, man. He's an idiot. And he's being financed to go around talking this shit, right? That triggers me. That pisses me off. And it just, what's the word? It just fits perfectly into my idea how fucked up academia is, right? These are useful idiots who are there to make sure that the cash flow from the poor little taxpayers keep flowing, right? We have to have somebody in certain situation who can sort of be gatekeepers for good philosophy, so nobody comes into our, semi-fascistic, semi-Marxist, whatever, clan of people sucking on state tits. Rather than, they are there to finance their cute little, safe space of a life, right? They are there to be protected against, manual labor, basically, right? They don't want to go out there and produce anything. They want to go down to the store and buy some fucking pickles in a jar. But they don't want to be the guy collecting the cucumbers and whatever, and carrots, and put them in the jar and put them in the boxes and put them in on the van and put them in the store and sitting there and scanning the code. No, he just wants the guy who are receiving money from poor little, tax-paying, poor people. And then go down to the shop and buy it and go back and tell you how you shouldn't use your illusions, right? Fuck you, man. Kick this bastard out of this university and tell him you're an idiot. Go out and do some real work and be, productive, right? Share, like, and subscribe. Give me a comment. And otherwise, see you in the next one.